Prophet is inspecting the army, inspecting the weapons, directing the companions, discussing strategy. A young boy, not 13 years old, comes to him and he asks the prophet, begs the prophet, may I please fight in the battle? And the prophet looks at him, clearly seeing that he's a young man, 12 years of age or so, recognizing his zeal and his love for Allah and his messenger. He turns him away, saying he's too young, certainly in his wisdom, knowing that he's valuable. And so this young man turns away, he walks away from the prophet, and I want you to picture it. Saddened at 12, he can't fight against the disbelievers. He can't fight in the way of Islam to support the prophet, to establish our religion. And he's walking away, and he has a sword that he had carried to the prophet. And this sword was a very long sword, perhaps almost the size or bigger than the boy himself. This is how much zeal he had. And he wanted to go to battle with a sword that he could barely carry. And you see him walking away, and he, in disappointment, puts the tip of the sword in the ground. Meanwhile, his mother is watching. And his mother, as saddened as him, comes to him and comforts him. The next year, this young boy, as they're getting closer to the second battle, the Battle of Blood, about 2 years actually after the Battle of Blood, he has an opportunity. He's excited. He says, maybe this time the prophet will let me fight in the battle. And so boys as they are, 13, 14, 15, 16, excited and ready and getting prepared, they all, with their weapons, their spears and their arrows and their bows and their swords, they go to the prophet. They say, surely the prophet will let us fight. We won the first battle. They're excited. The prophet looks at them and he says, you too? No. Yes. And he turns, and guess who's among the others? That he says, that not yet. And so this young man walks away again, feeling dejected, disappointed, or hurt. And he still hasn't had the opportunity to fight for Islam. So again, his mother comforts him. She goes to him, gives some encouraging words. Still too young to fight, the prophet calls him over and says, I promise there will be other opportunities. So with that in his heart, he turns his attention to other opportunities. And though he later becomes a companion who fights in many battles, he won't be known as a warrior. He'll be known as the great companion Zayd ibn Thabit. And Zayd ibn Thabit, may Allah be pleased with him, turns his attention to what Allah had given him as his real and true sword. And that was his intellect. That was his ability to use his knowledge, his skills of learning, reading, and writing. At a very young age, at around 16, he devoted himself to this interest. And he shared his interest with his mother, and his mother went to some of the companions. And his mother pleaded with them and said, please, my son, he wants to serve Islam. And he wants to be with the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Please take him to the Prophet. He's memorized 17 surahs of the Quran. Can you give him some time with the Prophet? And so they go and talk to the Prophet on his behalf. And he agrees to listen to Zayd. I want you to think about what a monumental moment this is for this young man. That the Prophet calls him, and he goes and stands before the Prophet and recites the Quran to the Prophet. And he recites the Quran so perfectly, the Prophet acknowledges, you have recited as I recited. So from a young man memorizing 17 surahs, he eventually became Hafiz al-Quran. And this great and noble companion, Zayd ibn Thabit, was asked by the Prophet to spend his time with him being his scribe. And some reports say that there were up to 48 scribes for the Prophet. One of the first things the Prophet asked Zayd to do was learn the language of the Jews. And so he went about learning that language. And so upon learning that language of the Jews, he was able to not only speak it, but interpret it for the Prophet. Not only interpret it, write letters when the Prophet was communicating